We're back, and so is Rod Martin, the chairman of the board of the Institute for the American Future, which makes this program possible. We could not be more grateful to him for his leadership of that organization and for so much else, including what he is now doing as the proprietor of rodmartin.org, where you can find the Rod Martin Report. It is an extraordinarily resourceful platform, and I'm proud to say he's featured our program and our interviews with him on it in many ways, and we're grateful for him doing so as well. Rod, it's a very important moment to be taking stock with you and your free-range mind. Wasn't a great day on Tuesday for the Republic, or the Republicans for that matter, and perhaps most especially for Donald Trump. Give us your read on what went down in particularly New York City, as well as Virginia and New Jersey, most especially.
Well, in typical political fashion, I'm going to argue both sides of this. So the headline is, blue candidates win in blue states. There's no getting around that. We don't have any business winning in those three places. We certainly weren't going to win the initiative in California. There was never any chance of that. So, on a certain level, we shouldn't be that surprised. Now, getting a little more micro and thinking about the future. Donald Trump made a big point of the fact that, maybe we lost because he wasn't on the ballot. Well, the problem is he's never going to be on a ballot ever again. So Republicans have to get their act together in the absence of Trump at the top of the ticket. And I think that we're on track for that with J.D. Vance or even Ron DeSantis or Ted Cruz, but probably Vance. I think we've got a good bench. Marco Rubio, certainly possible. These guys can lead, and I think they can sell in Pennsylvania and Michigan and so forth. I also think that we're looking at a decent future in maybe not Virginia, probably New Jersey, because we're making some real ground there in a number of ways on the ground, and that's a long, slow, tedious process. But the Democrats have done it to us, taking over California, taking over Colorado. We've done it to them, taking over the entire South, and now winning the so-called blue wall at least twice. So clearly things change. They aren't static. We shouldn't look at it from just election to election. However, in the immediate term, we clearly didn't turn our base out in this election at all. We had terrible turnout numbers on the right. The left was thoroughly motivated. That could easily carry over into next year. So I want to echo Newt Gingrich's take on that. We took way too long to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It means that we're going to start getting the real boom that comes from that later in the year next year than we'd like. If we screw that up, we're going to lose the House, maybe the Senate, and in the process, Donald Trump is going to spend the rest of his presidency fighting off impeachment attempts. Versus, if we win, we can actually finish the counter-revolution, and we have a glide path into 28.
Well, that is a hopeful rendering of it. I take it you do not associate yourself with those who think Donald Trump can somehow run again. Trump 28, as some of our friends are saying, not in the cards, sir.
Some of our friends are trolling the left, which is a permanent pastime for many of us, and I don't mind it at all. What they're doing is they're sucking up airtime that could be going to real issues where the president could be getting attacked, and instead pushing this fantasy that he's somehow going to be a dictator for life. That it's just not going to happen.
A king, I think, is the word for it.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. It unconstitutional, and any change to that would be insuperably hard. So, Rod, in terms of kind of the bottom line, do you sense that the Republicans under Donald Trump have what it takes to make the kinds of course corrections that will motivate their base, that will result in at least a fighting chance in the midterms to hold on to control. And to that point, how about all this redistricting business? Is that going to make it more likely they do?
Well, I think the redistricting effort is key, and I would feel bad about that if it weren't that the Democrats have already completely gerrymandered every state they control, and that's the real joke of Prop 50 in California. 42% of the state is Republican, and the Republicans have 17% of the congressional districts, and you're going to take a few more away? Well, whoop-de-doo. Versus, we could probably pick up 5, maybe 7 in Texas, depending on how hardball they want to play. We can definitely pick up seats in Florida. We can pick up seats in a number of red states. And that starts defeating the structural advantage they've built in for themselves through fraud. And I'm sorry, what they've been doing with districting is a form of fraud, but padding the electoral rolls, or at least the census rolls, with 20 million illegal aliens boosts their House seats and their electoral votes unconscionably. That has to be overturned, and the way you do that is with mass deportations, with prosecutions of public officials who aid and abet criminal illegals, and that's coming. And, of course, you actually treat politics as the hardball contact sport that it is, and you district properly in the states we control.
Yeah. And I think to your larger point, excuse me, and to your larger point, Rod, the Democrats have shown the way here. As I understand it, there are no Republican House members from New England. The entire place. There are certainly Republicans there, maybe not a whole lot, but they're not represented at all. And California Republicans and some of those in other blue states are going to be less and less represented as well. So game on, I guess, is the question. How much? But it does sound to me, as you say, it could make a profound difference, especially if the Republicans don't get their act together. And I'm praying that they will, and right quick. Rod, we have to take a short break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk trade with you and some of its manifestations under Donald Trump. Stay tuned. We're back, and so is Rod Morton, one of our regulars here at Securing America. I'm pleased to say a man who brings to the party a wealth of experience, going back to his time working on policy matters with Governor Mike Huckabee, now the wonderful U.S. ambassador to Israel. He was with Peter Thiel at the inception of PayPal. He has been an entrepreneur and businessman, and now he is a pundit. You can follow his great output at rodmartin.org and subscribe to the Rod Martin Report there. Rod, we want to talk trade, tariffs in particular, not least because the U.S. Supreme Court had a very important hearing on a case basically saying the president has exceeded his authority and is infringing upon that of the legislative branch. What did you make of the lines of questioning, and what does your crystal ball tell you about how the court is going to rule on this case?
Well, first, on a philosophical level, it's important to understand that the Democrats speak with forked tongue. As usual, they were perfectly happy for presidents to have basically unilateral authority to impose tariffs for the entire last century. And their presidents repeatedly imposed tariffs wherever they thought it good and proper to do so. So they're just lying. And on the right, we have a lot of people who have completely bought the unalloyed, uncaveated, unnuanced version of the libertarian position on tariffs, that they are purely attacks on the consumer. Well, I just had this discussion about our effort to abolish property taxes here in Florida. I don't have to buy any particular thing at any particular time, and we have a bunch of sales tax holidays in Florida. So if we hike sales tax to the moon in Florida, we've got 143 million tourists a year. That's almost double the number for California and New York combined. We're going to end up taxing a bunch of non-citizens to pay for our pretty roads and lovely colleges and so forth. And we're going to stop forcing widows who paid off their home 30 years ago to pay rent to the government. Well, tariffs are the same. I don't have to buy a Mercedes that was built in Germany. I can buy a Mercedes that was built in South Carolina, and there's zero tariff on that. I don't have to buy a Nissan from Japan. I can buy one from Tennessee. And that's the thing. From time immemorial, as far back as you want to go, the courts have traditionally held that the tariff power is part of the commerce power, not the taxing power. And Brett Kavanaugh made a good point of that yesterday. That was helpful. The truth of the matter is, foreign policy powers overlap between the legislative and the executive. The legislative branch delegated tariff-making authority to the president, starting with the Trade Act of 1930, updated and expanded it with the Trade Act of 1974. I mean, that's almost my entire lifetime on the second one. It's double my lifetime on the first. And there's no question that has been seen as constitutional all of these many decades, nearly a century. So why would it be unconstitutional now? And when you get into the argument in the particular act that Trump is using, it's very clear that Congress intended a blanket grant of authority over trade. So we have to recognize trade as being part of the president's foreign policy toolkit. And we should ask exactly what the Solicitor General asked. Why does the other side think that the president should have total authority to completely abolish all foreign trade whatsoever, but can't impose a 1% tariff? And I mean, it's just absurd. It doesn't make sense.
Let me just ask you this point. You have trained as a lawyer, so I know this is something you have a special ability to penetrate. But my impression was, watching a bit of this proceeding, that it seems it turns very much on this question of whether this is about raising revenues, whether this is a form of taxation, rather than a trade power, which clearly resides with the executive branch. Am I right about that? And did particularly, Amy Coney Barrett's line of questioning suggest that there may be a majority going against the president on this? And what would the implications of that be, Rod?
And yet she seemed quite open to the argument that a tariff is a license, that they're economically indistinguishable. And the president clearly has power to impose licensing requirements. And that includes fees, which is the point that was being made. So, it really, I think,
not for the purposes of raising money, but that is the practical effect.
That is the practical effect. And I think what you end up with ultimately, first of all, there's the political dimension. The 3 liberal justices are not going to vote with us, period. Then among the conservatives, you have to decide, is a tariff more a tax or is a tariff more a license? Is it more in the commerce power or is it more in the taxing power? And of course, you'll recall John Roberts found that Obamacare was principally a tax to uphold it. If he were to find that something that has historically been seen to not be a tax is one to knock down Donald Trump's entire foreign policy, that would be the height of absurdity, not to mention hypocrisy.
Well, and the other piece of this, of course, Rod, is, as you know, the president has, not through taxation, but through licensing and fees and the like, raised an enormous amount of money. I mean,
Yes.
Some estimates are $1 trillion, perhaps. And that money would presumably have to be paid back. There's a lot of angst about how you would even go about doing that, certainly doing it in a way that wouldn't further compound our financial circumstances. What are your thoughts on that, sir? Will that factor into their thinking, do you think, in the court?
Oh, yeah. Barrett and Alito pressed on that pretty hard. And of course, in the process of that, Alito brought up brought up the Trade Act of 1930 in a really important way. And, that has never been overruled. It's been on the books for 95 years, for heaven's sake. And it gives the president effectively unfettered authority to do anything he wants to do in the tariff space up to a limit of 50%. So, okay, can Trump work within that? Yeah, probably. So he said, look, we probably have to look at all of these provisions together if we're going to rule on this.
That's almost certainly going to be the case. Let's hope the court will do so. Thank you, Rod Martin. We have to leave it at that for the moment. There's a lot more to talk about. Come back to us next week if you would. We'll be talking, I'm hoping, to you, the rest of you, next time. Until then, I hope you'll go forth and multiply.